Hi, welcome to Punchline Talks, the Business Breakfast Briefers. I'm Mark Owen, and each week I invite a panel of business leaders and civic leaders to review the morning newspapers, find out what's happened in their own individual business and their own individual business sectors, and finally, what's caught their eye in this week's Punchline. But before I start that, I'd just like to thank our fantastic sponsors, Hazelwood's Accountants and Business Advisors. And I always say this, but we really couldn't do the show without them. Okay, if you like the show, please like, share, and subscribe, and let's meet the guests. Today we have Joshua Tay, CEO of Huffkins Bakery Tea Rooms. He has 9 tea rooms and concessions, 3 concessions, in John Lewis, including one in Oxford Street. The company famously exports their cakes to Japan. They have a turnover of 6.5 million and 140 staff, and they also own their own hotel in Broadway. That's in the Cotswolds, not in the USA. So we'll find out what's happening in the hospitality sector, especially tourism in the Cotswolds as well. We'll find out all that about very shortly. Okay, we've got Enzo Mora, CEO of a mortgage brain. The company has 110 staff covering the whole of the UK, with the majority based in Gloucester and Brunswick Road. The turnover hit 6 million last year. And we'll find out how the mortgage market is faring, as also the housing market. Is it slowing down? Are people still buying houses during the election? And finally, never last not least, we've got Roger Head, OBE. He's the chairman of the board of Pied Piper Appeal. He's the owner of Hynham Court and famous gardens. He's also a successful entrepreneur and co-owner of several business parks and trading estates in Gloucestershire, including Longhope Business Park, which is expanded to 200,000 square feet of mixed-use businesses. So we'll find out all about the commercial property market and how it's faring down there in the Forest of Dean as well. So thank you to our guests for joining us. Right, let's have a quick review of the newspapers, courtesy of the BBC. To start off with the Eye. Private school fees hit in Reeve's first budget, but delayed until 2025 as loophole closed. The Daily Express. BBC paid TV audience to appear at leaders' debate. The Guardian. Labour pledged to ban managers who silence NHS whistleblowers. Also, the story on the left there, E. coli, 1 dead and over 120 in hospital. That's about contaminated lettuce. The Metro. TV paramedic murder probe. The Financial Times. Top rate taxpayer numbers to exceed 1 million as threshold freezers swell coffers. The Daily Telegraph. Farage is a Putin appeaser, says Sunak. The Times. Shoot illegal immigrants, says Reform campaigner. The Daily Mirror. This is why we need to vote Labour. And the Daily Star. Invasion of the creepy crawly bog crawlers. Nice, you know, I've been bitten on the arse 4 times. Anyway, let's not talk about my personal problems. Roger, let's start with you today. What have you picked out from the papers? Because it's pretty thin pickings, isn't it, for the good news?
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at it for the last couple of hours and thought, what am I going to talk about? But right, if we start off about the proposal from Rachel Reeves about putting VAT on school fees, I think that's absolute nonsense. All that's going to happen is that less and less people are going to be able to afford private education, and that's going to fall on state education. And I actually think it'll end up, I think that the amount that the pupils that will go into state education will exceed the amount of money that they would have got from the VAT. I think it's a complete nonsense. They ought to be encouraging people to pay for private education. In fact, in my view, you ought to get tax relief on it because you're saving the state an amount of money. So that's one policy I certainly don't agree with the Labour Party, but I suppose there's lots of policies that I don't agree with any of the parties, because I think we've got some very difficult choices to make with what's going to be a very difficult political landscape. So that's my view on that. I bet Nigel Farage is really pleased about what one of his candidates said about shooting immigrants coming over the channel. I mean, what a complete idiot. I mean, why would you choose somebody like that? I listened to it this morning. I thought, you know, what are these people on? You know, that's just amazing. So that's going to cost him a few million votes, I would have thought. So, and the other thing, I mean, you didn't look at it when you put on the screen just now. I listened to some of the presidential debate last night and some of the comments about it this morning and some of the articles in the papers. But when you're talking about, you've got 2 men, one of them is going to be the most powerful leader in the world, of the free world, and you've got the choice of two men, a 78-year-old and an 82-year-old, and you listen to it, and I think Biden's got, great credibility in that, which, I mean, I don't think Trump has, but, he had a job to put his words together and his speech together, and you think, how can you have confidence in a nation, a great nation like America, but they can only find those two candidates? I mean, I just think it's absolutely amazing. And
Did you watch
what
some of
else
it,
would you like me to
Roger?
comment on this morning? Because it's all just
You just
negative.
broken up there. You just broken up
Pardon?
there at the end. You just broken up there at the end. So I'm going to go to
I've
Enzo.
lost you, Mark.
Don't worry.
Well,
Take your
Mark,
pick.
I'm glad that happened because Roger was about to steal my first storyline that I'd picked on. So the Times showed like a 3-minute video of Biden versus Trump, and it was amazing to see. Like Roger mentioned, Biden froze for about 30 seconds and didn't know what to say. He regained his thoughts to then follow on with accusing Trump of having sex with a porn star whilst his wife was pregnant. They then go on to talk about World War III, King Jong-un and Putin, using phrases like loser and sucker. And then they had an argument about their golf handicaps. I just think it's amazing. Our election build-up is quite boring in comparison.
I agree with Roger. It is so scary that these two men could be the leaders of the free world. Do you agree with this, Josh? Did you watch any of it?
I haven't watched the American debate yet. I know it was going on last night, but it's interesting actually. One article that jumped out to me was a piece in the Guardian that was published in the last 24, 48 hours, and it was a piece talking about how we're at a really odd moment for international politics because we have a global wave of elections going on. So not only here in the UK, obviously, which affects us all hugely, and then in the States, which has been for the longest time, the global solitary superpower really in a position that's now changing with the rise of China and challenge from Russia. But you've got 80 countries going to the polls for their general elections in the next 12 months. And there are some really interesting movements, as Nigel Farage has done here with the reform movement. You've got a lot of right-wing politicians making quite a lot of headway. So the Bank of England have actually issued a warning that they think that could impact the UK economy in the next 12 months because we just don't know who's going to get into power. There's so many elections going on. The scope for policy change is deep and broad within the sort of global economy. So I think we're at a very odd moment, not just here in the UK and not just in the US, but actually more broadly around the world. It feels like a pivot point.
Without a shadow of a doubt, it's very, very scary. Let alone we've got a war in Europe for the first time in 60, 80 years, whatever it is, and they're absolutely massacring each other on both sides of Russia. And now there's talk about Korea sending over 100,000 North Korean troops to help the Russians. Can you imagine that? How that's going to kick off? I mean, absolutely very, very scary. I got to ask you. Let's go back to the papers a second. So, Mora, there's a story here today about 3 million might be thrown. Mortgage interest rates going up. It says here more than a third of homeowners can expect their mortgages to jump by around £180 a month over the next 2 years, according to the Bank of England. I mean, how's that sort of, affecting your sort of side of the business? I gather you're not seeing any of that at the moment. Don't mind me asking.
No, that's a new one on me, Mark. We've seen lenders' rates fluctuate slightly this year. There was a 1% drop by a lot of lenders at the start of the year, and then they've moved up and down a little bit, over the last 6 months. But the latest trend is to see some reductions from lenders. And the only talk I've heard from the Bank of England up till you've mentioned that, there's the potential for rates to come down.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. It's the first time. I mean, sometimes in elections, papers are looking for sort of extra stories and things. But I'll tell you what, we'll come back to you about mortgages. I just want to go back over to Josh. Josh, there was a story just picking this up about the E. coli in lettuce found, and obviously somebody sadly passed away from it, and 120 people in hospital as well. Now you're in the food and hospitality industry. I mean, that must be a worry for you guys as well. Everyone working in that.
Yeah, I think it's something that we all eat. We all have to eat, and the majority of us should be eating some fresh food as well. So yeah, it's a worry. It's a nasty bug. It's one, I think in that particular instance, the supplier of the packet sandwich that I believe was responsible for this outbreak, has probably been very unlucky. It's E. coli is very hard to manage once it's on a product, so it needs managing right back in the supply chain at farm level, because it's very hard to clean the product of E. coli once it's on there. Washing a lettuce leaf under water is quite unlikely to rid it of E. coli if it's on there. So, as a business in the food space, you're putting food in people's bodies. Really, all you can do is operate to the highest possible standards around hygiene, and that's everything from the basics that the food safety guide will encourage you to do, like regular hand washing, cross-contamination control, right through to more stringent measures. In our business, we operate not just to the legal standard enforced by the environmental health officers. We have a private company come in and audit our site several times every year, and we operate to a much higher standard of control, where the cleaning regimes are at a much higher, more intensive level. And so for us as a business, that gives us, confidence that we're not just doing the bare minimum. We're operating actually at a higher level than is sort of mandated and recommended by the government agencies. But it is one of those systemic risks in food. If you're handling fresh food, these things do exist. It's a natural product, and there are natural, pathogens and bacteria out there which can be very nasty. So you've got to be very, very careful. I always think, the food business is incredibly intimate with people. There's little else you buy from somebody, in a market and then put inside your body. It's an incredibly, important thing, food hygiene. So we take it very seriously. But I suspect this wasn't a breach on behalf of the manufacturer. I suspect this is a fundamental supply chain risk that has landed, and it's simply come through their production facility, and they will have now a complete nightmare on their hands.
Okay, all right. Well, thanks ever so much for explaining that as well. Enzo, very quickly, did you have another story at all?
Yeah, well, we're right in the middle of Euros 24, so I felt I needed to build up on the hype that the England team are getting from the press. And amazingly, there's an article that says Foden returns to England camp as Gordon cuts chin falling off bike. But it's heating up now. We're at the knockout stages, and with a name like Enzo, I've also got a bit of an Italian connection, and I've been following the Italian team, who have not been doing very well, probably worse than England. But there's every chance that they could meet up in the quarterfinals if they both win their next match. So it's going to be a bit heated next weekend.
No, without a shadow of doubt. I've already booked my table at the pub. It's the first time I'm going to go to the pub, actually, to watch some of the games. I've been a Welshman. I do actually support England during the World Cups because Wales were never there over the years. So I had no one else to cheer. Anyway, thanks ever so much for that. I always just think, very quickly, why don't the papers just leave alone? Why don't we just get behind the teams? At the end of the day, they're top of the group. They made it through. That's what the job is, isn't it? They made it. Okay, it wasn't the greatest football going, but at least they're at the top, and now they're playing a sort of kind of less, not a lesser team, because there's no easy team in a European Cup. If you watch Georgia play, they were amazing. I don't know if you
Yeah,
watched those at all. They're honestly some of the other teams that you think wouldn't play so well have been just awesome. Italy, I
I
didn't
was a
think
bit
very much
lost.
of.
Well, today and yesterday I was at a loss because there's no football on TV. I've been watching from 2 o'clock in the afternoon through till 10 o'clock at night.
Well, you could have watched a disaster in the T20 when we got absolutely pasted. I don't know if you've seen that. So, as
No.
world champions, we were bowled out for 108 by India, which was a complete disaster.
Well, there we go. There we go. We're always losing somewhere. Anyway, let's talk business now. Come on, then, Roger. Let's talk about you own a number of different business parks, trading estates. You've got the big one in Long Hope. Honestly, the amazing job you've expanded down there. I don't know you chaps have been down there. 200,000 square feet. What is the marketplace like at the moment in your, in the actual centres itself?
Well, for industrial units, it's pretty good. There is more confidence in the market, but we're talking about logistics, manufacturing, storage, that kind of thing. And so we're always gonna need it. The office market is challenging, although we have seen a few lettings of late, and retail is quite difficult. Fortunately, we haven't got great exposure in the retail section, and we have some residential stuff, and there's a shortage of residential. So overall, it's pretty good, and I'm confident that if you've got good space and you're able to offer it at a reasonable price, it's all looking pretty good. And I found that over the last certainly 6 months, there haven't been the problem with tenants struggling to pay their rents. There seems to be a general improvement, and I think although we've got all the problems with the election coming up and what's going to happen, I think there's a general feeling that interest rates will start to drop now, because there's no doubt about it. Interest rates have had a major effect on business, and I've said before, I think a lot of it, I think it's counterproductive. Putting them up certainly at the rate that they were put up, it hurts companies. And I know that it's a tool for curbing inflation, but I think there's too much emphasis put just on interest rates when there's many other things that influence inflation. I think inflation is now under control. Probably too late to save the Tory party, because I think it's going to be a bit of a wipeout next week. But we'll have to see. But generally, I'm confident that that sector is good. And also, the other things that I'm involved with a telecommunications company. That's absolutely fine. People are spending more money on communications. Well, obviously, the way technology is moving. And you touched on hospitality. We've just had this classic car show for the Pied Piper, and we had nearly twice as many people turn out as a year before. We raised over £50,000 in one day. I think with the kids, we had about 7,000 people come. So there is, I think, more confidence for people getting out and spending money. So despite what's going to happen next week, I'm relatively confident about the future.
Well, that's a great way to go over to Josh, actually, because obviously I actually think there's a lot of money sloshing around in the system. I mean, what is the industry like there in the Cotswolds? They're spending money in the coffee shops and the tea rooms. Josh, what's it like for you out there?
Yeah, I mean, we operate cafe restaurants on the high streets. It's been, I'd say actually a very mixed bag. We have, a number of locations. A number of them are doing very well and are in quite big like-for-like growth. We're seeing a really strong return now of inbound tourism. So American and Japanese visitors in particular, who prop up that seasonal trade, particularly in the touristy destinations of the Cotswolds, where we have some thumping big sites right in the middle of things. There are other places where we trade, which are bigger towns with less tourist exposure, more working towns. And, I think we're seeing a slightly harder trading environment there. You've got pure retail in retreat, on the high street still. You've got then a lot of food and beverage operators coming in, particularly small cafe chains popping up. So, you know, as an outsider looking in, obviously the sector looks very active and buoyant. There are new coffee shops and things opening up all the time. When you're operating in that sector, that serves to dilute your market share. And there's some interesting data out there as to, you know, the percentage increase. I don't have it on the tip of my fingers, but it was up to about a year ago, I believe, over a sort of 2-year period, there was about a 30 to 40% increase in the volume of food and beverage businesses in high streets in certain parts of Oxfordshire, certainly. So it's been quite a steep increase in the number of competitors in that space, particularly in some of the bigger market towns where there are more units available and retail's dying off in places, being replaced with food and beverage. We're seeing very, very buoyant sales in B2B. We supply into trade as well. We have our own production bakery, so very, very buoyant sales there, which is great. And we sell online as well, and that's been fairly buoyant actually as well, which is good to see. So yeah, it's a mixed bag. On the whole, I would say positive, and definitely better than it's been in recent years. But
Okay,
I don't think we're quite out of the woods.
can I ask you very quickly? Cavendish House obviously is closed. Has that affected obviously the Cheltenham branch a lot?
Yeah, we have a site on the promenade in Cheltenham. Yeah, we've seen a decline of footfall there.
Yeah.
I think it's the whole. We also happen to have a site inside the John Lewis in Cheltenham itself as well. So we've very much hedged our bets in that town. But I think the way, you know, the high street and the promenade have changed over the years, the prime pitch is very much now on the high street rather than the prom at the moment. Yeah, we're seeing very, very strong footfall over at John Lewis and very, very strong demand, to the extent that we can't actually service all the demand over there. And yeah, on the prom, it's definitely, you know, at a low ebb. It's good to see some stuff going on in there. They've got some pop-ups in Cav House, but I think we need some investment there now. And I'm sure the owner of the building will want to make sure they protect their investment and get a long-term operation in there, whether it's a resi conversion or some combination of, you know, retail and resi or what.
The big problem there, Joshua, is it's a Canada Life is owned, you know, so they own it. Will they do something with it quickly? I don't know. No, thanks ever so much for being so honest there about what it's like on the footfall. I was wondering the other day when I was padding around, it was very, very quiet. Like Cheltenham is a bit like that, you know, it comes and goes, and high streets like that, isn't it? Ebbs and flows. Thanks ever so much for that. But Enzo, go back to the sort of mortgage market and the property market. Has that been slowing down, or is it pretty buoyant right across the board?
Well, 2024 has been quite a buoyant year, Mark. So I've been impressed or pleased with our performance this year. It's usually we usually see a bit of a slowdown towards an election, but our numbers have been pretty strong. June is usually a quieter month anyway. We work in the new build space and arranging mortgages for new build homes. And we're now at developers' year end, so they're scrambling to get things in before. Well, today's the deadline. Busy day today. I think we've got about 200 completions to still get over the line today, and hopefully none of those spill over into next week.
200 completions today. How? Why is that? Why is the cut-off date today? Sort of showing my naivety.
Well, it's financial year end, end of June. So this is the last working day of June.
Right, okay, right. And how? I mean, I know you've got 100 staff. I mean, obviously, how do they cope with so many coming in at once?
Well, it's a build up over the year. So these are sales that we've been working on for probably 6 months previously, and yeah, the developer needs to see completion happen today so they can hit their targets.
Right. Okay. And what else is happening in the market? And so, obviously, is there any new products coming out? Anything interesting in the sector?
Well, the Conservatives have stated they're looking to bring the Help to Buy scheme back in if they get re-elected. So there's nothing new that I see at this point in time. But hopefully, once we see the election out of the way, then we'll start to see some talk about what might happen in the housing market.
I just feel I know for a fact, talking to some of the property, housing people, it seems to be they've had a really great year, and Gloucester seems to be really buoyant at the moment, outperforming Cheltenham. So quite exciting actually at the moment. House prices are the yield is better in Gloucester than it is actually in Cheltenham.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks ever so much for that. We're kind of coming out at the end of the show anyway, so we'll go back over to you, Roger. What have you picked out from this week's Pick of the Punchlines, please?
Not a lot, but I did find one interesting article, and that was Nigel Tillett. I see he's an old friend of mine, and I see he's just finished 10 years of being race director of the Gloucester 10K, and raised over £100,000. Some of it has gone to the Shamwell Centre, which is a project that's close to my heart. We supported that with a Pied Piper. Obviously, the Holly Gazzard Trust, a brilliant charity, and the suicide charity. So a great contribution. Congratulations, well done to Nigel Tillett.
Yeah, no, without shadow about, he's a good friend of mine as well, and a fantastic marathon runner. So, and he's very, very sad that he's hanging up his boots on this particular side as well. And Davis and Partners as well. He's only going to be a consultant now. So we wish him all the very, very best. Okay, let's go back over to you, Josh. What have you picked out from this week's Punchline, please?
I was looking for some good news that I could credibly talk to. Unfortunately, being very exposed to the retail business, the headline that caught my eye was the CBI record of a retail drop in June, which basically reported a sales volume in retail falling pretty sharply in the year to June, which reverses some modest growth that we saw last month. I don't think I would read too much into 1 month's data really. In any case, but I think it's just interesting to see that retail demand is still on reasonably shaky ground, and we're not yet in a place where interest rates have reduced enough that households are demonstrating really strong and steady confidence. And I think it's something that a lot of businesses in the space I work in, which is SME, small, medium-sized businesses that don't have gigantic balance sheets, in the retail sector, I think a lot of those small and medium-sized companies are waiting for a bit of a firmer platform in order to have the confidence to really go forward and invest hard and have the confidence to grow. So I think it's just a litmus test for the sort of mood of the retail.
My big worry is the Labour Party and their giving more power to the unions, increasing the minimum wage, reducing hours, all sorts of things, getting rid of. There's lots of things that they're not talking about, but is out there, if you know what I mean. And the rise of the minimum wage, just to put that in perspective, really, to deliver my magazine, it actually put £800 just on that particular cost, which I couldn't pass on to my customers, over one publication. But that's basically the cost that it put onto it, really. And I think someone like yourself and some of the other businesses, perhaps like employing younger people, they're on about raising the minimum wage again for younger people. So why would you give a 16 or 18-year-old an opportunity who's going to have the same, not the same experience of a, say, 24-year-old?
Yeah, I think we can see why the party is doing it. It looks like a fairly easy way to curry favour, pushing people's wages up. It does seem very counterintuitive. The size of the increases we had in April in an environment where we're trying to battle inflation back down severe wage increases like that have quite a big inflationary effect, and I think most economists would agree with that as a statement. So, I have had some conversations with members at the Bank of England as well, behind closed doors, who were fairly exasperated by Treasury policy in that light as well. The Bank of England are working to bring inflation down, and the Treasury are merrily thumping, wages up in double-digit percentages. So we've got different horses pulling in different directions at the top, in some respects. But wage growth is not a bad thing in itself. We actually need some wage growth. I think it's more of a timing piece. There are bigger issues afoot, obviously, in our economy than just wages.
Wow. No, everybody wants to get more money. Anyway, we'll move on to Enzo now because we are running out of time. Enzo, what have you picked out from this week's punchlines, please?
Well, I usually like to find a light entertainment piece, but Punchline's been a bit serious this last week. But I did find something in your general election 24 update, general election number 56. Support legal cannabis market. The Lib Dems are considering regulating a market for cannabis. So if you're still considering who to vote for, maybe that'll be a vote swinger for some people.
It can make a lot of difference to me. And my pick of the week actually is that we are doing an election hustings next week. If anybody is interested, I have Richard Graham, Rebecca Trimble, and Alex McIntyre, the three main candidates in the leading parties, and will be sitting there with my dear friend Ian Mean from Business West, where we'll be quizzing them over a series of 15-minute debates for 4 different shows. It'll be on Zoom, and they'll be recorded and go live around 8:15 on Monday evening if you're interested. So it'll be very interesting. We're going to do something a little bit different and shake it up again and see what they've got to say, really. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for this week. Thanks ever so much, my fantastic panel, for joining us today. Hazelwood's Accountants and Business Advisors for being our fantastic sponsors, and for you for watching. If you like the show, please like, share, subscribe. We'll be back again next week. Remember, it's all in the punchline. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.
Everybody's waving.